Ethan had traveled far from Earth searching for work among the stars. His ship was old, patched together with parts he had saved from scrapyards and auctions. He wasn't a soldier, not a famous explorer, not even a captain with a crew. Just one man with an outdated vessel and more courage than sense. Most called it foolishness. He called it freedom. But freedom, he was learning, had its price. The ship shuddered when a sharp alarm rang through the cabin. Red lights flickered and Ethan grabbed the controls, fighting to steady the craft as it spun through empty space. Something had cracked in the main engine. Again. This wasn't the first time. He had stitched the machine together with spare wires, hoping it would last until the next station. This time, though, the engine gave no mercy. With a final choking sound, the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, tumbling toward the orbit of an unknown world. Ethan swore under his breath and pulled on the emergency straps. The planet below grew larger on the view screen, a mixture of green forests, silver rivers, and strange glowing ridges that pulsed like veins of light. He didn't have time to admire it. Gravity caught the ship, pulling it down like a stone. When the crash finally came, Ethan was lucky to be alive. The battered vessel tore through the treetops and carved a trench in the soft earth before screeching to a halt. Sparks hissed from broken panels. Smoke filled the cabin. Ethan coughed, unfastened his harness, and pushed himself up. His head throbbed, but he was still breathing. "Not my best landing," he muttered, grabbing a small pack and a plasma cutter. The ship would need hours, maybe days, to repair. Until then, he was stuck. He opened the hatch and stepped into the alien air. To his relief, it was breathable. A heavy scent of wildflowers drifted through the breeze, mixing with the earthy smell of moss. The sky was a strange shade, tinted with two suns, one pale and the other golden. The forest around him was unlike anything on Earth. Trees with shimmering bark reached high into the sky. Their leaves glowed faintly, as if storing light from the suns. Ethan's boots sank slightly into the soft ground. He adjusted his pack and started exploring, marking his path with small signal beacons. He needed resources, water, food, maybe some minerals for repairs. His mind was focused, practical, but his heart pounded. New worlds always carried danger. It didn't take long before he realized he wasn't alone. A rustle in the underbrush made him pause. He tightened his grip on the cutter, the closest thing he had to a weapon. The sound came again, closer this time. His instincts screamed to back away, but curiosity pinned him in place. Slowly, he turned. Out of the shadows stepped a figure. She was tall, her movements graceful yet uncertain. Her hair shimmered like silver threads catching the sunlight. Her skin was pale with a soft, iridescent hue, almost like moonlight on water. A long gown, torn at the edges, clung to her frame. She looked fragile, her shoulders trembling, her eyes wide with fear. For a moment, Ethan thought she might be some illusion of exhaustion. But then she stumbled forward, her lips parting as if to speak. Instead, she fell against him. Ethan froze, the cutter still in his hand. He felt her body trembling as she clung to him with desperate strength. Her arms wrapped around his chest, her face pressed against his shoulder. To his shock, she was weeping. Not just quiet tears, her whole body shook with the force of it. Ethan swallowed, stunned. He had met many kinds of beings in his travels, but never one who reacted like this. He didn't even know her. Why was she clinging to him as if her life depended on it? Her voice broke through her sobs. The words were not in English, yet somehow his translator implant captured their meaning. "Please, don't let them take me. Don't let them find me." Ethan blinked. His mind raced with questions. Who was they? Why was she here, alone and in such despair? He gently lowered the cutter and raised his free hand, patting her shoulder awkwardly. "Hey, it's okay. I don't even know what's going on. But I'm not going to hurt you." She looked up at him with tear-streaked eyes. They were a deep violet, unlike anything human, glowing faintly in the dim forest light. Her gaze held fear but also relief, as if she had been waiting for someone, for anyone to come. You're human, she whispered. Just like the stories said. Ethan frowned. Stories? About humans? He didn't understand, but before he could ask, she clung to him tighter, shaking her head. You don't understand, she said, her voice breaking. If they see me with you, they'll kill you too. Please run. Instead of running, Ethan held her steady. I'm not leaving you like this. Who are you? What happened to you? For a long moment she said nothing, only wept into his chest. Then, with a trembling breath, she whispered, I am Syria, daughter of the High Throne, but my throne has been stolen. My family betrayed, and She faltered, unable to finish. Ethan's mind reeled. A princess? Here? Clinging to a stranded human explorer? It sounded like something out of a legend, not real life. But her tears were real. Her trembling was real. And the desperate grip she held on him was stronger than anything he could ignore. He glanced around the forest, suddenly alert. If she was running from enemies, then danger was near. He tightened his hold on her arm. All right, Syria. Whoever you are, whatever you're running from, I'll help. But you need to stay quiet, stay close, and trust me. Can you do that? She looked at him, tears glistening on her cheeks, and gave the faintest nod. Ethan guided her away from the clearing, deeper into the shadows of the forest. His heart raced. He had come here only to fix his ship, but now he found himself carrying the burden of an alien princess. Why she had clung to him so desperately, why her tears seemed endless, he didn't yet know. But something in her voice, in her eyes, told him the truth was bigger than survival. As the suns dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden beams across the forest floor, Ethan realized his journey had just changed forever. Ethan led Syria through the alien forest with careful steps. The suns hung low, painting the trees in bands of gold and silver light. The glowing leaves swayed above them, their faint radiance guiding the way like lanterns. Birds with crystal-colored wings darted between branches, their calls echoing through the air. It might have been beautiful, even peaceful if not for the heavy fear clinging to Syria's every movement. She stayed close, her hands gripping his sleeve as if letting go meant losing everything. Ethan tried to ignore the pressure in his chest. He had fixed broken engines, navigated asteroid belts, and even survived food shortages on long trips. But this was different. He was walking through unknown lands with a weeping princess by his side. The weight of her secret pressed on his mind. Princess? Betrayal? Enemies hunting her? He wanted answers, but he also knew pushing too hard might only break her spirit more. Syria, Ethan said softly, his voice low so it wouldn't carry through the trees. I don't understand much, but if I'm going to help you, I need to know the truth. Why are they chasing you? What really happened? She hesitated, her steps slowing. The glow of the trees cast shadows across her pale face. She looked younger, now not like the royal figure she had claimed to be, but like someone lost and afraid. Finally, she spoke. It was my brother. Ethan frowned. Your brother? He wanted the throne, she whispered, her voice trembling. Our father ruled with wisdom, but when he died, the council chose me. They said it was my destiny to lead. But my brother, he hated me for it. He thought no one would ever follow him if I lived, so he spread lies. He turned the guards, the council, even the servants. One night, they came for me. I escaped only because one loyal handmaiden warned me before it was too late. Her words tumbled out like broken pieces of glass, sharp and filled with pain. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Betrayal within families wasn't new. He had seen greed and power struggles tear people apart on many colonies. But to hear it from her with tears still shining on her cheeks struck something deeper. So your own brother wants you dead? He asked. She nodded slowly. He wants no rival. If I die, the people will have no choice but to follow him, and he fears the prophecy. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Prophecy? What prophecy? Syria shook her head quickly as though afraid to say too much. It is not the time. Not yet. But it is why I could not stop weeping when I saw you. Your kind is part of it. Ethan's heart skipped. That only left more questions swirling in his head, but he let it rest for now. Her grip on his sleeve had grown tighter with every word. She was speaking not only of danger but of despair. He could see the years of pressure behind her eyes, the expectation to rule, the sudden betrayal, the crushing loneliness of losing, everything in a single night. Listen, Ethan said firmly, stopping to face her. I may not be part of your world, but I've dealt with hopeless situations before. The only way through them is to keep moving. I'm not going to leave you behind. Not now, not ever. Her violet eyes widened, glistening as fresh tears threatened to fall. You would help me even though you owe me nothing? Ethan managed a faint smile. Well, I suppose I do owe you. If your people hadn't built this forest with breathable air, I'd be choking back in my wrecked ship. So let's call it even. For the first time since they met, Syria gave a small, trembling laugh. It wasn't much, but it was real, and it eased some of the heavy weight between them. They moved on, deeper into the forest. Ethan scanned their surroundings constantly, alert for any sign of pursuit. He marked trees with his small signal beacons, though he doubted anyone from Earth would come searching this far. It was a habit, a way to keep control when everything else felt uncertain. Syria began to speak more as they walked. She told him about her people, the Arendari. Their empire stretched across the stars, built on traditions older than Earth's, recorded history. Their capital city was a place of crystal spires, glowing rivers and gardens that floated in the sky. She had grown up there, never knowing fear until the night of betrayal. Ethan listened, fascinated but cautious. He knew better than to trust every word of a story told by royalty. Yet the way she described her world wasn't filled with pride. It was filled with grief, as though she had lost not just a crown, but her home, her identity, everything she had ever known. As the suns dipped lower, the forest grew darker. Strange lights flickered in the distance, floating orbs, glowing insects, maybe both. Ethan decided it was time to stop and set up a small camp. He found a hollow between two large roots where the ground was dry. He pulled out a compact fire starter from his pack and sparked a small flame. Syria sat close to the warmth, her gown still torn, her hair tangled from running. The firelight painted her features in soft gold, making her look both fragile and strong at once. She didn't speak for a while, only watched the flames with tired eyes. Do you miss it? Ethan asked after a while. Your palace, your throne? Her lips pressed together. I miss my people, not the throne. A ruler should serve, not sit above. My father taught me that. But I could not protect them. I could not even protect myself. Ethan shook his head. Don't blame yourself for what others chose to do. Betrayal isn't your fault. She looked at him with quiet wonder, as though she had never heard such simple words before. You speak as if strength comes not from power, but from heart. Maybe it does, Ethan replied, poking the fire with a stick. Power fades. Heart lasts. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who had nothing left but each other's company. The night grew colder. Ethan lay awake, listening to distant sounds. Howls, the crack of branches, the hiss of wind through glowing leaves. Syria slept fitfully beside him, curling into herself as though still trapped in the nightmare of betrayal. Once she whimpered, in her sleep, and Ethan covered her shoulders with his jacket. As dawn touched the forest, Ethan's mind remained restless. He had landed on this world only by accident. He had no plan to stay, no reason to get involved in royal struggles of alien empires. Yet, here he was, guarding a weeping princess as if she were family. He sighed quietly. What have I gotten myself into? But when Syria stirred awake and gave him a small, grateful smile, he knew the answer. He was in too deep to turn away. For the first time since crashing, Ethan wasn't thinking about repairing his ship. He was thinking about her, about the secret she carried, about the prophecy she dared not explain, and about the tears that told him more than words ever could. The forest whispered around them, but danger was never far. As they prepared to move again, Ethan caught movement in the distance, dark shapes slipping between trees. His stomach tightened. Whoever hunted her was closer than he thought. He touched Saria's arm. "We need to keep moving. Now, her." Eyes widened and she nodded, fear flashing across her face once more. She clung to him again, not with despair this time, but with determination. Together, they stepped back into the endless forest, carrying the weight of secrets and the shadow of enemies they could no longer outrun. The morning began with unease. Ethan had barely spoken the words, "We need to move," before the forest itself seemed to shift around them. He and Saria hurried along the soft earth, boots and bare feet pressing into moss that glowed faintly under the twin suns. Every step was cautious, every glance behind them tense. Ethan kept his plasma cutter ready, even though he knew it was no proper weapon. He had once used it to slice through stubborn ship plating. Now it would have to serve as a shield against whoever stalked them. Saria stayed close, her violet eyes scanning the shadows. "They are here," she whispered. "I can feel them. My brother's hunters." Her words tightened Ethan's chest. He had suspected the shapes in the distance weren't animals. Now he knew. This was no longer just survival. It was pursuit. Then, "We'll have to stay ahead," Ethan said, forcing calm into his voice. "Do you know this forest?" She shook her head. "I fled into it blindly. My people fear these woods. They say spirits walk here, ancient guardians from before our empire. Few dare to enter." "Spirits?" Ethan muttered. He didn't believe in ghosts, but the thought of an entire empire avoiding these trees didn't help his nerves. They pressed on, weaving between trees that shimmered with faint light. Ethan marked their trail with more beacons from his pack, though part of him knew they wouldn't be returning this way. The forest thickened, roots twisting like snakes, branches forming a ceiling that dimmed the suns. Strange cries echoed from deeper within, half animal, half machine, as though the land itself was alive. Hours passed. The sound of pursuit grew clearer, branches snapping, voices carrying faintly through the air. Ethan urged Saria to keep moving, though he could see exhaustion in her steps. Her gown, once flowing and elegant, was torn and smeared with dirt. Still, she pressed forward, refusing to give in. When they reached a river, Ethan halted. The current was strong, rushing, between glowing stones. "We'll cross here," he said. Saria's eyes widened. "The water is cursed. It carries whispers of the dead." Ethan crouched, touching the cold flow with his hand. "Cursed or not, it's better than leaving tracks behind us. Water will hide our trail." He looked at her and added softer, "I'll be with you the whole way." Her lips trembled, but she nodded. Together they waded into the river. The current tugged at their legs, pulling hard enough that Saria nearly stumbled. Ethan caught her arm, holding her steady as they fought their way across. The water rose to his chest, icy and unyielding. When they reached the far bank, both were shivering but alive. Behind them, faint shadows appeared at the river's edge. The hunters had arrived. Ethan and Saria crouched low behind a ridge, watching as the figures paused. They were tall, armored in dark metal, their faces hidden behind sharp helmets. The language they spoke was harsh, their words carried by the wind. "They are debating," Saria whispered. "Some fear the river. Others will not stop." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Then we move before they choose." The forest beyond the river grew stranger. Towers of stone jutted upward, carved with symbols that glowed faintly in the dusk. Vines wrapped around them, but the carvings still shone through. Ethan traced a hand over one as they passed. It was warm, as though alive. "What are these?" he asked. Saria's gaze softened, almost reverent. "The ruins of the first ones. They built before even my people came. It is said they left behind wisdom and curses." Ethan frowned but said nothing. He didn't believe in curses, but he could feel the weight of the place. It was ancient, powerful, as if the stones remembered every step taken upon them. Night soon fell, though in this world, night was never fully dark. The glowing trees, the faint silver light of the second sun, and the strange symbols gave the forest an otherworldly glow. Ethan and Saria pressed deeper, but he could sense Saria's exhaustion. She stumbled more often, leaning on him for support. Finally, Ethan led her into a cavern formed beneath one of the ancient stone towers. It was shallow but hidden, with enough space for a fire. He lit one carefully, shielding the light as best as he could. Saria sank beside the warmth, her shoulders trembling. "They will not stop, my brother's hunters. They will follow me until one of us dies." Ethan sat across from her, his face stern. "Then we make sure it isn't you." She looked at him, her eyes glistening in the firelight. "Why? You could leave me. You could repair your ship and escape. Why risk your life for me?" For a moment, Ethan was silent. The truth was complicated even for him. But finally he said, "Because no one deserves to face this alone. I've been alone most of my life. I know what it does to a person. And I can't stand to see someone else crushed by it." Saria blinked, tears slipping down her cheeks again, but softer this time, not from despair but from something else. "You speak with heart, not with power. My people would never understand such words." "Then maybe they need to hear them," Ethan replied. The night did not pass peacefully. Sometime near dawn, Ethan awoke to faint footsteps outside the cavern. He motioned Saria to stay quiet. Slowly, he crept to the entrance, cutter in hand. 2 hunters stood among the trees, their helmets reflecting the dim light. They scanned the ground, searching. One raised a device, its screen glowing. Ethan's chest tightened. "They're tracking us," he whispered. Saria's eyes widened. "Then it is hopeless." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Hopeless is giving up, and I don't plan to do that." He scanned the cavern. The walls were etched with more glowing symbols. An idea sparked. He remembered how the stones felt alive under his touch. Carefully, he pressed his hand against one of the carvings. The symbol flared brighter. A low hum echoed through the cavern, deep and ancient. Outside, the hunters froze, their helmets turning toward the sound. Then, as if struck by invisible force, they staggered back, retreating into the trees. Ethan pulled, his hand away, his heart racing. The light dimmed again. He turned to Saria. "What just happened?" Her face was pale with awe. "You awakened the stones. They are guardians. No one has touched them for centuries, not even my people. They responded to you." Ethan swallowed. He had no explanation. He wasn't chosen, wasn't special, just a mechanic with bad luck and stubbornness. But the stones had answered him. Saria stared at him with trembling lips. Perhaps the prophecy was true. When dawn broke, they moved again. The hunters were still near, but more cautious now, as though the forest itself stood against them. Ethan guided Saria through winding paths, over roots and ridges, across glowing fields of flowers that swayed without wind. Saria spoke little, but when she did, her words carried weight. "You risked yourself for me, and now the forest listens to you. You are not just a stranger, Ethan, you are part of something greater. I can feel it." Ethan shook his head. "I'm no hero. I just don't like seeing good people hunted." "Heroes rarely call themselves heroes," Saria replied softly. By nightfall, they reached the edge of a wide valley. Below them stretched ruins larger than any before, broken towers, bridges half buried in vines, and a central temple glowing with faint blue light. The sight was breathtaking, ancient, and alive. Ethan stared, his voice low. "Looks like we found shelter." Saria's expression was different, half fear, half wonder. "Not shelter," she whispered. "This is the place my father warned me never to enter. The heart of the prophecy, the temple of bonds." Ethan's chest tightened. Whatever truth Saria carried, whatever reason she had clung to him in tears, it was waiting for them down there. The hunters were still out there, but so was the answer. Together they began the descent. The valley stretched before Ethan and Saria like a memory carved into stone. Towers leaned at odd angles, their broken tops reaching into the sky like the bones of giants. Vines crawled over fallen bridges, but the carvings on the walls still glowed faintly. At the center of it all stood the temple, a massive structure built of black stone that shimmered with lines of blue light. Ethan stared down at it, gripping the strap of his pack. "Well," he muttered, "if I ever saw a place that screamed important, this is it." Saria's face was pale, her violet eyes wide. "This temple, my father told me never to come here. He said it was sacred, tied to a time before our empire. He said it was waiting." "Waiting for what?" Ethan asked. Her lips trembled. "For you," Ethan blinked. "For me? That makes no sense. I'm just some guy who crashed his ship." But Saria shook her head firmly. "No, you don't understand. The prophecy of my people, it speaks of humans." The words sank into Ethan like a stone into water. "Humans? As in, Earth humans?" "Yes," she whispered. "The first ones who built these temples made a pact long ago. They said one day, when the Arendari faced betrayal from within, an outsider from Earth would come. He would awaken what we could not, and he would decide the fate of our throne." Ethan felt his chest tighten. He wanted to laugh, to shake his head and call it impossible. He was no chosen one. He was a mechanic with a broken ship and too many scars from bad luck. But the memory of the glowing stones in the cavern came back to him. How they had flared when he touched them, how the hunters had fled. He swallowed hard. "So that's why you clung to me? That's why you wept when you saw me?" Her eyes glistened with tears. "Yes. Because I knew what it meant. My brother fears the prophecy, Ethan. He wants me gone because with me alive, the chance of it coming true remains. And when I saw you, I realized it had begun." Ethan sat down heavily on a rock, his mind spinning. He had thought he was just helping a frightened princess survive. Now she was telling him he was part of some ancient prophecy written before his species even left Earth. It was too much, too sudden. "Look," he said slowly, "I'm not a savior. I don't know how to fix kingdoms or fight empires. I fix things, that's all I do." Saria knelt beside him, her voice soft, but steady. "Maybe that is exactly what we need. Not someone who wants power, but someone who understands how to mend what is broken." They began their descent into the valley. The ruins grew larger with every step, their glow brighter as night settled in. Strange sounds echoed through the stones, deep hums, faint whispers, as if the temple itself breathed. Ethan couldn't shake the unease. Every instinct told him to turn back, to run before he was dragged further into something far beyond his reach. But every time he looked at Saria, trembling but determined, he felt the weight of choice pressing harder. When they reached the temple's gates, the air grew thick, heavy with energy. The entrance was framed by two towering statues, their features worn by time but still noble, their hands raised as if in warning. The doors themselves were massive slabs of stone etched with glowing lines. Ethan reached out, his hand brushing the surface. At once the lines flared, spreading across the stone like veins of fire. The doors groaned and slowly opened. Saria gasped. "Only a human could do this. My people tried for centuries. The doors never moved." Ethan stepped back, stunned. He hadn't even meant to open them. Yet the temple had responded to him as if it had been waiting. Inside, the air was cool and thick with the scent of age. Blue light streamed from cracks in the walls, illuminating a wide chamber. At the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a crystal sphere glowing faintly. Symbols floated above it, shifting and twisting. Saria's voice shook. "That is the heart of bonds. My father told me it binds two destinies together, our empire and yours." Ethan approached slowly, his footsteps echoing. He stared at the sphere, his reflection flickering in its surface. His chest ached with confusion. What did any of this mean? Why him? Ethan, Saria whispered, stepping close. Touch it. The truth will show itself. He hesitated. His hand hovered over the sphere. He wanted to refuse, to step away, to let someone else carry this burden. But he thought of Saria's tears, of the hunters outside, of the forest stones that had answered him. Slowly, he placed his palm against the sphere. At once, light surged. The chamber blazed with brilliance. Ethan gasped as images filled his mind. Scenes of Earth long ago, humans meeting beings of light, agreements made, promises forged. Then, he saw the Arendari, proud and strong, standing beside humans in unity. He saw betrayal tearing that unity apart, and he saw a single figure, human, unnamed, standing beside an Arendari heir. The vision faded, leaving Ethan trembling. The crystal's glow dimmed, but a faint symbol remained on his palm, burned softly into his skin. Saria reached for his hand, her eyes wide with awe. It is true. The prophecy marks you. You are the bond. Ethan pulled his hand back, shaking his head. No. No, I can't be. I'm not a hero, Saria. I'm no king, no warrior. I can barely keep my ship flying. Her tears shimmered again, but this time they were different. They carried hope. That is why it must be you. My brother seeks power. You seek only to help. The heart chose you, Ethan. It does not make mistakes. The sound of footsteps shattered the moment. From the entrance, armored hunters poured into the chamber. Their leader, taller than the rest, raised a spear of crackling energy. There she is, he snarled. The false heir, and the outsider who dares touch what is forbidden. Saria clung to Ethan's arm, fear flashing in her eyes. Ethan's heart pounded, but something inside him had shifted. The vision still burned in his mind, and the mark on his palm pulsed faintly with light. He raised his cutter, though he knew it was useless against so many. Still, he stepped in front of Saria. You'll have to go through me first. The hunters advanced, but the temple itself seemed to stir. The carvings along the walls lit up, glowing brighter and brighter until the entire chamber hummed with energy. The hunters froze, their weapons faltering. Ethan didn't understand it fully, but he knew one thing. The temple was protecting him, protecting them both. Saria's voice rose with sudden strength. Do you see? The heart has chosen. The prophecy is alive. The hunters faltered, some lowering their weapons in fear. Their leader snarled, but even he stepped back as the glow intensified. Ethan's breath came heavy, his hand still burning with the mark. He had no plan, no training, no destiny he had asked for. Yet in that moment, as Saria clung to him with trembling hope, he realized the truth. The prophecy wasn't about power or crowns. It was about trust, about standing together when betrayal threatened to destroy everything. He looked at Saria, her face lit by the glow, and whispered, I think I finally understand why you wept when you saw me. Her eyes shone with tears and light. Because you were the one I had been waiting for. The hunters retreated, their fear clear. The temple's hum faded, leaving silence heavy in the air. Ethan lowered his cutter, his hands shaking. Saria touched his arm gently. You may not believe it yet, Ethan, but you are the one who can help me reclaim my throne, not as a ruler, but as the bond between our worlds. Ethan swallowed hard, his mind still spinning. He had wanted nothing more than to repair his ship and leave. Now he stood marked by prophecy, tied to a princess whose tears had once seemed so mysterious, and he was stunned. Stunned not just by the truth, but by how deeply it had already changed him. The silence inside the temple stretched long after the hunters withdrew. Ethan stood with his chest heaving, sweat sliding down his face, and his cutter trembling in his grip. The glow from the walls faded slowly, leaving the chamber dim but still alive with quiet energy. The mark on his palm continued to pulse faintly, as though it carried its own heartbeat. Saria stood close to him, her gown torn and dirt-stained, yet her posture was strong. Her violet eyes never left his face. You saw it, Ethan. The heart chose you. The prophecy lives. Ethan lowered the cutter, staring at his marked hand. I never asked for this. I just wanted to fix my ship and get home. But fate does not ask what we want, Saria whispered. It gives us what is needed. Her words lingered in the air, heavy and undeniable. Ethan turned toward the crystal pedestal once more. He still remembered the images burned into his mind, humans and Arendari standing side by side, bound by a pact forged in ancient times. It wasn't just about her, throne. It was about unity, survival, and trust between two worlds. They left the temple before dawn. The ruins glowed faintly in the valley, casting pale light over the broken towers. Saria walked beside him, her steps steadier now. Ethan could see the change in her. She no longer carried only fear. She carried hope. But danger still followed. The hunters hadn't disappeared, they were regrouping. Somewhere in the distance, horns echoed faintly, a call for reinforcements. We don't have long, Ethan said grimly. Your brother won't stop sending them. Saria's face darkened. He will not stop until I am gone, but now, I have something he cannot touch. You. Ethan sighed, running a hand over his face. Great. That makes me feel so much better. Despite the tension, Saria gave a small laugh. It was soft, fragile, but real, and for a moment it eased the weight pressing on both of them. They reached higher ground by midday. From the ridge, Ethan could see smoke in the distance, villages burning, banners raised in his brother's colors. Saria's lips pressed tightly, grief filling her expression. My people suffer because of him, she whispered. He wants them afraid of me, afraid of change. He will not rest until fear is all they know. Ethan stood beside her, silent for a long moment. He wasn't a leader, he wasn't a soldier, but he knew what it meant to stand up against bullies even when the odds were impossible. Then we don't run anymore, he said finally. If your brother wants to take everything, he'll have to face us first. Her eyes widened. You would face him? For me? For what's right, Ethan corrected, though his voice was softer. He met her gaze. And for you. That night, they set a trap. Ethan used parts from his pack, beacons, wires, power cells, and rigged them into makeshift devices hidden along the forest paths. He explained each piece to Saria, showing her how light could distract, how sound could confuse, how energy could stun. You are not like my people, she said, watching him work. We build with beauty and tradition. You build with scraps, yet it saves lives. Sometimes scraps are all you've got, Ethan said, tightening a wire. And sometimes scraps are enough. When the hunters came, the traps worked. Bright bursts of light blinded them. Echoes of false footsteps sent them chasing shadows, and sudden shocks of energy forced them to scatter. Ethan and Saria moved quickly through the chaos, striking only when they had the advantage. For the first time, Saria fought beside him, not with weapons but with courage. She shouted warnings, guided him through hidden paths, and stood firm when fear threatened to return. Together, they turned survival into resistance. By dawn, the hunters retreated again. Ethan collapsed against a tree, exhaustion pulling at his limbs. Saria knelt beside him, her hand brushing his shoulder. You risked everything, she said softly. He managed a tired smile. That seems to be the story of my life. Saria's expression shifted. She looked at him not with despair, but with something deeper. Trust, gratitude, perhaps even something like affection. You are more than the prophecy, Ethan. You are my shield, my bond. Ethan felt the weight of her words. He wasn't used to being anyone's shield, anyone's bond. But here, in this alien forest with danger pressing closer every hour, it felt right. Their final test came sooner than either expected. As the suns rose high, the ground trembled with the march of armored feet. This time, it wasn't just hunters. It was an army. At their head rode Saria's brother. His armor gleamed with black and silver, his crown sharp and cruel. His eyes burned with cold fire as he pointed his spear toward them. Sister, he called, his voice echoing. You shame yourself clinging to an outsider. Surrender now, and perhaps I will grant him a quick end. Saria stepped forward, her voice steady though her hands shook. You betrayed Father's teachings, you betrayed our people, I will never surrender. Her brother sneered. Then you will die, as will he. Ethan stood beside her, raising his cutter though it looked pitiful against an army. His palm burned, the mark glowing brighter than ever. He didn't understand its power, but he knew one thing. He wasn't walking away. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. The mark flared. Light erupted from the ground, racing through the ruins, spreading across the valley. The temple answered again, its hum shaking the air. The soldiers froze, their weapons flickering. Saria's voice rang out clear and strong. Do you see? The heart has chosen, the bond is alive. Her brother's face twisted with rage, but fear crept into his eyes. His soldiers wavered, their loyalty shaken. Some lowered their weapons. Others turned away entirely. The light grew brighter, surrounding Ethan and Saria in a shield of energy. It wasn't his doing, it was the prophecies. The first ones had bound this place to respond, and now it rose in defense. Her brother roared in fury, but his power crumbled. His army scattered, and as he fled into the forest, his crown fell from his head, lost in the dirt. When silence returned, Saria sank to her knees, trembling with relief. Ethan knelt beside her, his hand still glowing faintly. It's over, he said softly. She looked at him, her eyes wet with tears, but this time not of despair. Because of you, because you stood when no one else would. Ethan shook his head. Because we stood together. She smiled faintly, and for the first time since he met her, her smile carried no fear. Days later, word spread through the land. The princess had returned, not with an army, but with the bond. People who had once doubted her began to gather, their hope rekindled. Saria's brother was gone, his shadow broken. Ethan repaired his ship at last, but when he looked at the sky, he didn't feel the urge to leave. The mark on his hand reminded him of the promise he had made, not just to her, but to something greater. Saria stood beside him, her gown cleaned and mended, her crown once again on her head. But when she turned to him, she wasn't a princess or a ruler. She was simply Saria, the one who had clung to him, the one whose tears had begun this journey. You could go, she said softly. Return to your world. Nothing holds you here. Ethan looked at her, then at the mark on his palm, then back at her. Maybe nothing holds me, except the choice I already made. Her eyes glistened, and for a moment she looked as if she might weep again. But instead she smiled, a smile filled with freedom. Together they stood on the ridge, watching the suns rise over the land. Ethan knew he had stumbled into something far larger than himself, something written long before he was born. But he also knew this truth. The prophecy was never about destiny. It was about standing beside someone when they needed you most. And that choice, his choice, had changed everything.